Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the 7 o'clock author event. Katherine Heiny is our guest this evening, and I am so thrilled to get to know her better with all of you. Her latest novel, Early Morning Riser, is set in, of all places, Boyne City, Michigan, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump from McLean and Eakin. I've seen Early Morning Riser dubbed as unconventional and quirky. And I think that since real life does tend to be unconventional and quirky, that's why this book is resonating with so many people. The approachability of the characters and Katherine's deep understanding of them drives the narrative. I like to call this this type of writing. I hope I'm not overstepping by describing your writing, but I like to call it character driven, which is really what I prefer, regardless of genre, whether it's sci-fi, historical fiction, nonfiction, like educated. I need a character to connect with, and I connected with every single character in this book, even Willard, who I hate, and we'll talk about him a little bit later. But it felt like the reader was working together with the characters, and then your experience just kind of transcends from the page because you're in it together with these people. For those of you watching, whether or not you're familiar with Boyne City or Northern Michigan, you will love this book because at some point we've all put ourselves out on a proverbial limb when it comes to love. And we don't know 100% if our feelings are going to be reciprocated. And it takes a lot of guts. And that's what Jane has. She's our protagonist. We have to let go and trust. And that's what brave Jane does when she follows an elementary teaching position to a small town in the middle of a beautiful nowhere, where she meets a beautiful cast of characters, including a beautiful man who everyone in town has already been in love with as well. Which is so typical of, small town life. I loved that aspect of it, and it's a continuing theme throughout the book. We spend the rest of the book peeking through our fingers. How is this going to end? Is it going to work out or not? But that's not really all the book was about for me. It was more, it was the beauty of community, which I think, especially going into 2020, we could all use a really healthy dose of the beauty of our community. And I think that is also another reason that it has resonated with so many people. For those of you who don't know about the book yet or haven't seen the incredible media everywhere about it, the Washington Post said, Katherine Heiny's Early Morning Riser may be this year's funniest novel. Amazing to have the Washington Post say that. Glamour magazine said, this book is so charming, funny, and engrossing. Don't get mad if, once you've finished it, you can't quite recall whether you too had sex with Duncan Ryfield after a Grateful Dead concert in 1984. And then my very favorite, just like hit it out of the park. I love Kirkus and PW. I love their reviews. And Kirkus said, this is a heartwarming novel with a small town vibe that sparkles like wine sipped with friends under backyard fairy lights. Come on. For the woman who received 31 rejection letters for her first short story, now Kirkus is fawning, all over you. And how long has it been since you received those rejection letters? Years.
I still get rejection letters.
You do.
Stories out. Yeah, I don't think any author ever stops getting them. And I think you have to accept that they're part of being a writer. Otherwise, you're too scared to send stuff out. And then where are you?
Yeah, but not everybody then, gets a call from the New Yorker about that same story. So that was fantastic. And if you want to talk about that as well as more about the book, that's great. We're just thrilled to have you. So tell us why Boyne City, or tell us your take on what we should know about the novel.
Well, I grew up in Michigan. I grew up in Midland, and we always vacationed in northern Michigan. And then for my husband's job, we moved around a lot. So in 2004, we bought a house in Boyne City to spend the summers, to give my to give our sons a little more stability. And I had wanted to set a novel there. And the first novel I tried to set there was about a brother and sister who hire somebody to get in an accident with their elderly mother because they want her to stop driving. And I couldn't make that novel work, but the man that they hired was this local woodworker, Lothario guy named Duncan, and I liked him so much that I kept him. I started it over, but I knew that I didn't want to write the novel from his point of view. I wanted to write it from the new woman in his life. And just as I was sort of deciding to do this, my son's third grade teacher told me that the DEA had gotten a tip that the house next door to them was growing and selling marijuana. So the DEA came and kicked down the door, but they got the address wrong and they kicked down his teacher's door. And she was at school and her husband was at school and they had to drive home and deal with the DEA, and it was pajama day and they were wearing their pajamas. And it struck me as like the greatest story ever. And so I decided to make Jane, the narrator of my new novel, an elementary school teacher. It was just a really arbitrary decision, although the joke about pajama day is the very first joke in the book.
Oh, that's right.
And it's in different form. There's no DEA involved, but and then I loved setting a book in northern Michigan. I want to set all my books there. And Boyne City, maybe Petoskey can rival it, but I think Boyne City has the most beautiful sunsets in the world. And actually, when I was writing the book, we had to take out some sunsets because I was sort of talking about them every like 5 minutes. But my family hit so many milestones in Boyne City. You know, both of my sons took their first steps there. My younger son took his first steps in a bar called The Sportsman, which is mentioned a lot in the novel. And he was kind of an early walker. We think maybe he wanted to get his hands off the sticky floor. So and both my sons learned to ride bikes there. They had their first summer jobs there. It's a very cool place, and it's there's also, you know, a certain amount of the small town. You get good and bad. I think it's a cliche to say that small towns have a slower pace of life, but I think there's an ease of life there that's very, very addictive. But the first year that we owned the house, we didn't have Wi-Fi, and I used to tiptoe over to my neighbor's house at night to latch onto his Wi-Fi. And after I'd done that like 3 days, the other neighbors were like, "Why do you go over to Ralph's house in your nightgown every night?" And I was like, "Oh."
Were you sitting on his front porch, or where were you?
No, I just tiptoe to like the edge of his property where the Wi-Fi was, and this was before people had locks on their Wi-Fi, so I could just latch on and check my email, but it did not go unnoticed. And that's
nothing goes unnoticed.
That's one of the themes of the novel. But Boyne City has such a special place in my heart. I just think it will be forever one of my favorite places.
Oh, that's fantastic. Actually, one of my favorite parts of the book is a sunset. Duncan and Jane are sitting together. I can't remember the exact words, but he just says, "This is the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen." And she says, "It is." And it's just this very simple, this very special moment of taking the ordinary and appreciating it. Appreciating the beauty around you, which is also a theme throughout the book that I loved. The people appreciate one another. Jane comes to that realization. No. What's that?
I said yes and no.
Right.
Someone no. Yeah.
Well, Jane seems to come to that realization a little bit later about some particular people. This is a really hard book to talk about and not give anything away, which I'm gonna do my very best, but there are some questions I have. especially about Duncan. I want to talk about him without giving anything away. But we don't hear from Duncan. We don't hear anyone else's point of view. As you said, you had Duncan already, but you wanted the point of view to be from Jane's point of view. And she's not what we in the book industry would call an unreliable narrator, like from Gone Girl or The 13th Tale or Fight Club. It's not that she's an unreliable narrator. She's more like a Jane Eyre in the way that she comes to this realization this happy realization toward the end of the book. I mean, there's no wife in the attic. I'm not giving anything away here. But we accept what she tells us to be fact. But about a third of the way through the book, I started thinking, maybe is she wrong about Duncan? Maybe this isn't as casual as she thinks it is. Maybe he really does love her. And that's when people start, when you read it, you start kind of doing this about their relationship because you're wondering what's going to happen. And I was so connected to Jane. I just wanted her to be happy and get what she wanted. And there are, these several moments that are like these doing, realizations for Jane that she really doesn't know herself that well. And I wonder, they call some books, they term them as coming of age stories, which I don't really think this is because she's older when she moves there, but she has these realizations about the people around her. So this is a very, very long way to ask you if you intended Jane to be self-aware and then realized that she wasn't, or if you knew all along that she was kind of like all of us and she can only tell herself the narrative that she sees.
I think that there's certain things that are a sort of slow reveal to Jane in the novel because they were a slow reveal to me as a writer. There's one revelation very late in the book that I won't give away, but I was at the supermarket leaning into the frozen food thing, reaching for the thing of French fries when it hit me. And now that since 2020, that sounds like a really glamorous, exotic thing to be doing.
Right.
I was in a store. But it really it shocked me. I was like, oh, so once I got it, then Jane could get it. But I think that Jane is very young when the book starts. She's 26, which is not 16, but it's still pretty young. And I think that she can't just have a relationship with Duncan. She has to have a relationship with the whole town. And the whole town is constantly telling her how unreliable he is. So I think she has to sort of learn to trust herself and not the other, residents of Boyne City who can't wait to tell her what a bad choice she's making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in small towns, everybody likes to tell everybody exactly what they should do and what they shouldn't do, which is both the charm and the difficult part. So Duncan is easy to love. He's, he kind of is who he is on the page and you just love him and he's just easygoing. And the character that I really, really loved, it's sort of like when you're watching a movie and you have, that side character who's like the comic relief, was Phyllis. And Phyllis is Jane's mother. For those of you who haven't read the book yet, the best way to describe Phyllis for me, or the best example of who Phyllis is that she has this very long, very detailed, very horrifyingly embarrassing conversation with Duncan about menopause. And she is this woman who has no filter. And I would love to hear more from her perspective. I feel like there's a whole book that Phyllis could write about, where she came from. Can you tell us a little bit more about Phyllis?
I'm not quite sure where she came from. There's Phyllis and Aggie are two very bossy characters in the book. And they were sort of bossy in my mind and just sort of showed up and started talking. And people tend to either love or hate Jane's mother. Like, I loved her. I loved all the
Me
characters.
too.
But I'm really glad that my mother was nothing like Jane's mother. And I remember when I was writing the menopause conversation, just being like really, really happy that I could Duncan go through it without me having to go through it.
Yeah. And he sort of just takes it in stride, and so does Jane. And it's just kind of, she knows who her mother is, and they just kind of just move right on past it, which is what you kind of have to do with Phyllis, right?
I think one of Duncan's strengths is he's like, I think partly his personality and partly the life he's led, he just doesn't get bothered about a lot of stuff. And I think that Duncan is utterly transparent. What you see is what you get.
Right. And then at points you wonder if he's too good to be true. You know, that's part of the suspense. It's not a suspenseful novel in that way, but there's a suspense about the relationship and what will happen. And Duncan is he's wonderful. You said you moved to Boyne City because your husband moved around a lot. And I heard an interview about when you first met at a party. And I would love it if you would feel comfortable telling that story, because I thought it was so fantastic.
Sure. We met actually at a bar, and he was wearing a tuxedo because he's British, and he'd come from the British Embassy. And I wanted to talk to him. So I said, "What do you do for a living?" And he said, "What do you think I do?" And I said, "I think you're a Secret Service agent." And unknowingly, I nearly gave him a heart attack because he was actually an MI6 agent, just like a spy, like James Bond. He's retired now, so I can tell people. But when I first met him, he was under death threat, and I couldn't tell anybody. I was always really afraid I was going to get drunk at a party and tell someone. Which when I told my husband that, he's like, "You weren't the only one worried about that."
He was worried about you. He wasn't worried about himself.
Oh, no, not at all. He never worried about himself. So, but also when he finally told me what he did, I was kind of like, is that true? Like, what are the odds that I'm actually dating a spy? Maybe he's, and I knew this girl in New York who thought she was dating the drummer of Stray Cats for a year and found out he was just like not even in the band. So, you know, it happens. And so, but amazingly, he was who he said he was.
That's so great. So did you have kids when he was still an MI6 agent?
Yes.
Is that what we call it? An agent? I don't know what we call it. But,
exactly. Yeah. We did, but he was no longer undercover when the children were born.
Did they think he was pretty badass? Because, I mean, if your dad works for MI6, that's kind of amazing.
Well, actually, when he used to drop our older son off at preschool on his way to the embassy, and all the kids would be like, "Zingus's dad!" And his husband was like, "That's not really, you know, the cosmopolitan man of mystery that I want to be." But yeah, I think we're all pretty proud of him.
So he was sufficiently adored, but not they didn't overdo it. They kept it classy. Got it. So Jimmy is a hard character to discuss, but I think about Jimmy every day. I think we all know a Jimmy. We're maybe not all as kind to the Jimmys that we know as Jane is. Jimmy's different. He needs someone to take care of him because he doesn't really understand the way that the world works. He needs to live with his mother. She takes care of him. And then I am going to reveal a little bit, but she does die in a car crash, and Jane takes it upon herself to take care of him. And she feels responsible for the circumstances of his mother's death. And then she feels this, she's saddled with him, is the way that I sort of felt for her throughout that part of the book. And until she isn't anymore. This is one of her realization moments. It's actually Phyllis, the mother with no filter, who tells Jane that Jimmy's mother would have died before him anyway. And it's like this light bulb just goes off inside of Jane. And she suddenly sees Jimmy for who he is, for what a light he is, and not as a burden. I was wondering if you could talk about that feeling a little bit, and if you've been through this with someone, if you know somebody like Jimmy, or where he came from.
Well, the realization that Jimmy's mother would have died naturally, that was the French fry moment when I was in the supermarket.
Well, so I just ruined it. Yeah, sorry.
It's okay.
I left a lot out.
Jimmy sort of came about accidentally because I knew early on that Duncan that he owned this woodworking shop, but it was like barely solvent, and he never finished anybody's orders on time. And I wanted him to have an assistant, but I figured the assistant's not going to be like some go-getter. And so I decided to have the assistant be a sort of intellectually disabled man. But as Jimmy's role in the novel got bigger, it was so important to me that he be a kind and decent man and worthy of love with a complex personality, and that he not just be like a sort of plot device, and that that he would add to Jane's life, that he's insightful in his own way, and he's funny and loving, and it was very, very important to me that he be like this fully dimensional person who just happened to have an intellectual disability.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't really based on anybody, but he was a lot of fun to write. He doesn't have much of a filter either. Nobody in the whole book has a filter. Yeah.
Well, Jane kind of does, but because we're getting her perspective, we we know what she's really thinking, even if she doesn't say it out loud. So I guess, yeah, no filters. Which is what you said to me before we even started. You said that you don't have that much of a filter. So I wonder if they all,
They all think after me. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Somebody in the comments asked if your characters are based on your imagination and or real people. So I guess we've covered Duncan was not a real person. Jimmy was not a real person. Phyllis was not a real person. Is anybody in the book based on somebody you know or admire or anything like that?
No, they're all pretty much just straight made up. There's a character named Gary who's really unobservant and very eccentric and kind of bewildered person.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was writing the book, I knew that I wanted Gary to have a health scare, but I didn't want it to be something serious. And I kind of thought, what if it's something that's even sort of Gary's fault, like due to his unobservant nature? So I'm sort of mulling this over, and my husband goes to play squash, and he texts me that his squash partner is having blurred vision and dizzy spells, so they're going to the ER. And then he texted me from the ER and said that the cause of the blurred vision and dizzy spells is that instead of wearing his squash goggles, his partner was wearing his wife's bifocals. And I just thought this was so great. I was like, well, that's what's going to happen to Gary. And I just put it straight in the book, which is a thing when you're writing a book and you're really, really into it, it seems like the whole world is sort of helping you along. And I guess Jane is very addicted to thrift stores, and I'm addicted to thrift stores.
Okay.
So that's in the book. And my son my younger son had an emotional tantrum that was basically like a psychotic break over on, behind Camp McSaba.
Mm-hmm.
So if you drive to Lake Michigan, there's that little parking lot there, and you can walk to the beach. He totally lost it there, and he didn't even recognize me anymore. He's like, I want my mother. And I thought, oh People are going to think I'm kidnapping you. So that part is definitely true.
Oh, that's so fantastic. I think we've all been there. Yeah. And your mother told you that, what was it that she said after you had your baby and she came over and she said that she told you that you could have it all after you had your baby and that she had lied to you? She told you that
she realized later that nobody can have it all, that it's this huge, and that did make me feel a lot better because like I say this in every interview and I feel my sons are going to watch these and be like, sorry, but I felt like when I had children, I stopped being able to write because it wasn't a lack of time, but it was a lack of energy. I really had no creative energy. And I didn't start writing again till my younger son went to first grade. But that work-life balance, it's really, really hard. I think every single person struggles with it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, COVID has made it even more apparent. People have had to choose between their careers and staying home with their children because, daycare wasn't available. And luckily, I have an amazing husband and we are in the same business. And so we figured out very quickly that we could not work from home efficiently. It had to be one of us working and one of us taking care of our child. And then we would switch on different days, but we needed the whole day to get anything done. And it's, that work-life balance is really, really hard. And your mother nailed it. She nailed it. I would love to talk about her a little bit because I think it was Saturday was it Saturday in the Guardian? Mm-hmm. There was an article that you wrote, a beautiful, beautiful article about your mother and that you hadn't seen her since the beginning of COVID because she is in an assisted living facility and she has Lewy body dementia. Is that the correct diagnosis? And you said, I wrote it down, I loved it so much, that you have a new syllogism. Premise 1, I love my mother. Premise 2, I tell my mother stories all the time, even if only in my head. And the conclusion is, storytelling is an act of love. And I just loved that so much, the way that you share so much with your mother. I have a mother who I share everything with as well, and the things that we think are funny, not everybody thinks is funny. But Phyllis and Jane don't really seem to have that relationship. Jane is very irritated by her mother and does not see the comic relief at all, which was an interesting choice. Did you do that intentionally or?
Yeah, I knew that for the second chapter, which takes place the day before Jane's wedding, that I wanted Jane's mother to be making her miserable. So it became necessary for her mother to be that sort of person. And then she was just so much fun to write that she sort of became that person more and more and more. But my mother, like usually in a lot of interviews, people ask if I keep a journal or a notebook. And I never have, but for 20 years, my mother and I emailed each other daily. And I kept all those emails. So it's sort of the form of a journal because there were a lot of stories in there. And my mother no longer knows who I am or even that anybody's there, but I still have stuff to tell her. I think it's this weird sort of narrative thing of like, apparently it's not all about my mom listening. A lot of it's about me talking. And I've heard a lot of people whose spouses have died still call the answering machine or the voicemail and leave a message, and that's a way of sort of processing things. So yeah, I think that telling stories to people, it's about more than just entertainment.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've got a lot of listeners, and I would love to know more about her. I don't want to spend the whole interview on your mother, but you said in another interview something about how it was like your mother and your father brought home the wrong baby from the hospital because they were both scientists. What did they do? What kind of scientists were they? And how did they feel about your career choices, I guess?
Well, I grew up in Midland, Michigan, which is the headquarters of the Dow Chemical Company. So it wasn't that my parents were scientists, like basically the whole town was. My mom was a chemist, and my dad was a chemical engineer, and both my brothers are engineers. And when I took the SAT in high school, or the ACT, I scored in the 7th percentile in math. And my dad was just like so disbelieving. He was like, you could have guessed on every question and done better. And I was like, instead, I really tried. And that was like the best I could do. And later when I went to the writing program at Columbia, and all you had to do at that time was you got in on the strength of your writing sample. And my dad was like, do they know about the SAT scores? You never tell them. So, but no, my parents were always really super supportive, and books were so valued in my family, and reading was so valued. And they were always like, do what you feel most strongly about. So I think they were a little bewildered by my choice, but they were just rock solid behind it. I was super, super lucky.
That is fantastic. And if it makes you feel any better, I was not allowed to take any math classes in college because of my score on the ACT. I was supposed to take a remedial math course at college before I could take any of the math courses. So I just skipped all the math and took all the English courses and became an English major instead.
That's pretty much what I did too.
Yeah, go with your strengths, right? And it's funny how we do that to ourselves. It's, scientists should have one kind of child and English majors should have another kind of child. Unfortunately, my child keeps saying that she's going to be a bookseller. We keep trying to tell her she's going to be an astronaut or a princess ninja, but that doesn't seem to be taking. We kind of let society lay their expectations over us, in that way, just based on who our parents are. Were the people in your community did you spend your whole life in Midland then, or your growing up years, I guess?
Yeah,
so
right until I left for college.
Did you feel like you had a lot of people who were, right? I believe it's right brain. See, I don't even do the right and left. That's too much math. But if you were right brained, did you feel like you had a creative outlet and a lot of people who were like you amongst all of those Dow Chemical execs and everything?
Well, Midland it has one of the greatest libraries, the Grace A. Dow Memorial Library.
Oh,
so amazing. So I guess I always felt like I grew up where books were understood and everybody read, and I did feel like math and science were a little beyond me, which they turned out to be, but it wasn't a horribly, isolating feeling. Because I always loved books so much. I knew that was what I wanted to be doing and reading.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't really notice when you're a born English major. You're lost in your books anyway, right?
Yeah.
So I have a couple giveaways, and I wanted to ask a question to the audience. And now I've lost my questions, but I think I know them. One of the questions that I had was, there is a scene in the book where Jane is at a beach, and I wondered if anyone here knows the name of the state park that is close to Boyne City, and whoever gets it first is going to win a free copy of Katherine's book, Early Morning Riser. So if you put it in the comments, whoever knows the state park that's close to Boyne City first, you will win a free copy of Early Morning Riser.
See that. See the comments. Is anybody answering?
Oh, there we go. Melissa Purdy. You just beat Lindsay. Sorry, Lindsay. So Will you write down that? Okay. So Melissa, you're going to win a free copy of Early Morning Riser. We will contact you to get it to you by Facebook. And there are some other landmarks in the book, like Young State Park, and Kilwins is one of them. It plays a very, very large role in this story. And I wondered if they know. Does Kilwins know that they're in the story?
Not as far as I know, but maybe I should send them a book because it really does have a huge role in the book.
It does. I'll walk one over there later tomorrow.
Oh.
I'll make sure they get one. And why did you pick Kilwins and not Murdoch's is going to be the big question. And if anybody here is not familiar with Northern Michigan, I'll just explain real quickly that fudge, ice cream, and chocolate are very important to our economy. That is not a joke. The two stores in downtown Petoskey, Murdoch's and Kilwins, are right across the street from one another, and you're either a Murdoch's person or you're a Kilwins person. And I'm just an ice cream hussy, so I'll go to whoever's in front of me or closest or whatever's open. But I'm guessing you are a Kilwins person, and I wondered why you chose that business and not, say, a bookstore for where your character was going to work in the book.
There's no Murdoch's in Boyne City. There's only Kilwins and Kilwins. So,
got it.
But when you asked me in an email, like, why did it take place at that store and not another store? The book is so real to me that I was like, well, what are you talking about? It happened where it happened. I saw it happen there. So I really like ice cream, and setting it there the summer that I was writing the book, or at least finishing the book, I was like, we have to do research. We have to go down to Kilwins and get an ice cream cone.
Absolutely.
But I think that going to that Kilwins and getting an ice cream cone, and then you can go across the street to, I think it's Veterans Park, and watch the sunset. That just is like the quintessential Boyne City experience for me. So it seemed natural to have the store be the Kilwins.
That's great. I love that. What is your favorite ice cream at Kilwins?
I think it's the peanut butter and chocolate, although I like the raspberry one a lot too.
What's Phyllis's favorite? The peppermint, I think?
Peppermint stick.
Peppermint stick. That is a good one. Mine is the toasted coconut.
Oh, that's good.
Have you had it?
They're all good. Yeah, I'm sure I've had every flavor in the whole store. Yeah, we're talking many summers of research.
Somebody else earlier had a question. Let me see if I can go back up. Oh, I don't know how to go. Didn't Lindsay ask a question, Maris? Did you see that? Can't scroll back up here.
What are your favorite things about Boyne City?
Oh yeah, what are your favorite things about Boyne City? And somebody else wants to know how long you lived there. So people want a little more information about Boyne City.
I only ever lived there as a summer person, although sometimes we came up at Christmas time too. And we lived there from 2004. We owned the house from 2004 until 2019. And I actually was writing the last pages of the book as the movers were packing up around us. And it felt like the whole world was ending. It was really emotional. And I thought, I mean, this was before 2020, and we knew what truly bad things were. But this was like, I was like, I'm losing everything all at once. But my sons are old enough now that we can't go up for the whole summer. So it just, it made sense to sell it. But it was hard. In the corner of the wall, we had all the markings, all the measurements of their heights. And it's such a wonderful place. And we were so lucky to have it as long as we did.
Yeah. What is your favorite restaurant in Boyne City?
I really liked Lester's, when the barbecue place.
Okay, yep.
Was there. And there was a restaurant when I was a teenager called Little Lena's that maybe really old people like me will remember. I think probably now it's Cafe Santé. They have that view of the water.
Oh, yeah.
Very nice there.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah. Somebody just said, I miss Lester's good throwback. Let's see. I had another question to give away another book, and it was, what was the question? Oh, who can guess how many people there are in Boyne City? Whoever in the comments gets the closest first without going over, I'll do it like The Price is Right, you will win a free copy of Early Morning Riser as well.
Oh, look at that.
Whoa, Kelsey, 3,700. You nailed it. Kelsey gets the next free book. So Kelsey, you're going to get a free copy of Early Morning Riser. It depends on which census you look at, but 3,700 is pretty much right on the money. So nicely done, Kelsey. Lori wants to know if you've ever thought about writing a historical romance book around the tannery and that time period.
I really like to read historical fiction, but even in Early Morning Riser, where it covers like 2002 to 2017, it was a lot of work just to make sure I wasn't, pulling anachronisms in and citing shows that hadn't come up. And I kept sort of mixing up the timeline, which was my own fault, but that was really, and also, Boyne City rests in this little hollow, so nobody had cell phones there until maybe like 2010. I mean, we had them, but they just didn't work very well. And when I first turned in the book, my editor was like, what year is it? Why isn't anybody using a cell phone? So I sort of had to work that in. And I don't know, maybe I will write a historical book. I really do like historical fiction a lot.
Well, you can start with Phyllis.
Yeah, her early life.
Just an idea. Your other two books I have here, Standard Deviation and Single Carefree Mellow. Do you want to tell people about these a little bit?
Well, Single Carefree Mellow was my first book, and it's a collection of stories. And I don't know. It was like having your first book published is so amazing. I don't think I'll ever be able to look at it without sort of feeling emotional. And then Standard Deviation is a novel, and the woman in that book, it has no filter. And I think that as I wrote it, what little filter I have eroded. And it was while I was writing that book that my son asked me to write a note to his teacher about something. And then he was like, but don't try to be funny. I was like, oh. Well, first of all, I am funny. So you need to appreciate that. But so yeah, really Standard Deviation is about life with a lack of filter.
That's great. I love it. Single Carefree Mellow. But you weren't single when you wrote it then. So had you written any short stories that started this train of thought when you were single, or did you just write it at that time when you were married and living in Boyne City then?
The stories, there are a couple stories from when I was very young, like that I wrote when I was 22. But as we started putting the collection together, we started, I had stories with the male protagonist and older characters, but we deliberately didn't include those because we wanted it to be sort of about women in their 20s. I think a couple of them are in their 30s, but
okay. And then
the stories.
Oh, sorry, I lost you there. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, that's okay. I was done.
And then Standard Deviation. Tell us about this one. I love this cover too. Well, I love all of your covers, frankly. I really like this.
Well, standard deviation also, my older son went through a really extreme origami phase. And when you love somebody who loves origami, it becomes a big part of your life. And, we had to go to conventions and things and deal with a lot of really crazy origami people. And so it was really fun to explore that in the book and to explore the eccentricities of all the people who love origami.
Oh, that's great. Are they kind of like the Lego people?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it seems like they would have a lot in common.
Yeah. We went to origami convention when my son was like 10, and the teacher held up Hingus's origami as like an example of really sharp creases, and the man sitting next to him got so angry, like this vein started throbbing in his neck, and I was like, it's so competitive, but
oh my gosh, I love it.
It's pretty extreme.
Well, so, and if you lived in northern Michigan at that time, how did you even know about an origami convention? You didn't have a cell phone, so you didn't really have internet other than your neighbor. So,
well, this was a bit later, and we only lived in Michigan during the summer. So
right.
The rest of the year, we were origami seekers. Although I think the Boyne City Library had an origami guy come. The Boyne City Library is really great in their programs for kids.
Yeah, all of our libraries are so fantastic here, and our schools are so great. We're so lucky. I was just commenting on that with someone the other day. The teachers that I work with, for some of the children's programming, and the librarians up here we're very, very lucky. That's how we get out. That's how we've always gotten out. But I think during COVID, Northern Michigan has really shined and excelled because we've been preparing for being isolated for a very long time. So tell us what you're reading now.
Well, when the pandemic started, when we were back in lockdown, I could only read the Little House on the Prairie series. That was like nothing less familiar than that, nothing more complicated than that would do. And then I read a memoir called Notes on a Silencing by Lacey Crawford, and it was so powerful and so beautifully written. That sort of ended my reading, whatever the word is, but solved my reader's block.
Yeah, dry spells. Yeah.
And then I read Exciting Times by Nisha Dolan, which was really great. And a few months ago, I was on Facebook on my phone, and under the people you might know, there was this tiny little thumbnail picture, and I went to the University of Kansas. And as soon as I saw this picture, I was like, oh, that's the guy that I sat behind in government, and he had really beautiful handwriting. And I had this flashback to being in the dorm, drunk in a party, and that guy got on the elevator, and I told him he had really beautiful handwriting, and he looked really scared and got off at the next one. And so, but this all came back in a flash when I saw his photo. So I reached out to him, and it is that guy. And his name is Michael Cleaver Diggs, and he has a collection of poetry coming out in June called Worldly Things, which is smart and luminous and funny and important and all the things that you sort of hope poetry is, and it isn't those. I guess you hope any book will be those things. But so the University of Kansas is still enriching my life because I'm having these like drunk flashbacks.
I love it. I love it. And just so everybody knows, we will have a list of all the books that Katherine is discussing in our Monday email. And if you don't already have the email, or if you're not signed up to get it, you can just go to our website. A little box will show up, and you can sign up for it there, so you can see all the books that Katherine was talking about. And what are you, I guess this is the last question that we'll have time for, from Diane. What are you working on now?
I'm writing a new short story collection, and the first story that I finished for it is a story about a woman who gets really drunk at the airport. And everyone I've told about it looks really nervous and says, "Is it about me?"
Oh my
And
God.
I'm like, no, it's about me. And it actually takes place at the Midland Airport. So
I didn't even know there was a Midland Airport.
well, it's the Tri-City Airport. The
Oh, okay.
second airport. And I wrote it. One night I was there waiting to fly out of Midland, and the planes kept getting delayed. And then our flight was canceled, and I was sitting in the bar. And the woman next to me said, "This would have been good to know 4 beers ago." And I was like, off. I was like, that's all I need to write the story. She's in it. She's great. Here we go. So, you find your inspiration where you can.
Oh, that is fantastic. I love it. Well, if anybody else is interested in getting a copy of Katherine's books, we have them here. They are, did we get the signed ones already?
We have one more giveaway.
Oh, right, but I don't remember the questions on that one. So we have Early Morning Riser here available. We can send you one in the mail. You can stop in and pick them up if you'd like, because we are open for business. We opened for regular browsing, no appointment needed, for the first time in a year on Tuesday. And it was very, very scary. And you've all been very, very nice. And we are lucky that our customers have supported us throughout this very trying year. And we are so excited to be able to put Katherine's book in your hand as our first book of the summer that you are absolutely going to adore. So stop in and pick it up. We're open. What are our hours? Let's see, 10 to 7, Monday through Saturday, and 11 to 5 on Sunday. I don't even know, because this is, so fresh. 3 days, 2 days. Katherine, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure entirely. You're one of my favorite bookstores. I've been in your store so many times. So,
well, the next time you come, I hope it's for your short story collection, and we can have a glass of wine together.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Bye.